So I just wanted to capture my thoughts before I lost them because I feel like this was very profound, at least for me. I have gone through a lot of depression in my life. I have failed to see a lot of meaning. I know what is right, I know what is correct, and I have failed to live up to certain standards that I know I should have lived up to. But beyond that, I thought about what those standards are and what the standards of living are. And in order to even exist, we constantly have to struggle. As we know, Mein Kampf, my struggle, life is struggle. Sisyphus, ever pushing the boulder up the hill. Life is struggle. The question, can struggle be enjoyable? What's the point of suffering? You suffer to build something, and for what? What's the point? What's the reason? What's the reward? What's the payoff? And that's the hard part to understand for me is why suffer? If this was a video game, I'd turn it off. Why am I playing this game? Why am I doing it? I'm not having fun. And if I beat the game, if I make all kinds of money and I work my whole life with no joy and no pleasure and I do all these things, I just suffer my entire life to build what? To have what? I don't get to take it with me. So what's the point of suffering? To achieve some form of pleasure? And if pleasure is the end goal, then that means that pleasure is preferable to pain. Is that not right? We would all prefer to be pleasured than in pain. So the problem with pleasure is that the pursuit of pleasure leads to suffering. It leads to pain. Lust is a perfect example. Pursuing lustful impulses will destroy not only yourself, but society as a whole. So what's the point? It's a cycle of pain and pleasure. Is the pleasure worth the pain? Why would we choose to suffer for momentary pleasure, which could ultimately destroy us? It just seems like it seems like an unwinnable situation. Even if you achieve a place where you can have pleasure through the suffering that you've already given, that pleasure will ultimately destroy you because it makes you weak and you won't continue to exist. So then the question becomes, why continue to exist? What motivates people to continue to exist? Why exist? Why experience if experience is mostly pain, and in order to achieve little bits of pleasure, we have to suffer continuously? I say all that to preface And now I want to expand upon it with a little bit of personal experience. Recently, my grandfather passed. 96 years old. One of the smartest men I've ever met. I valued every moment I had a chance to sit down and talk to him. There was always some wisdom to ascertain. And in his final days, they found cancer. Aggressive cancer that grew by the day. It was clear that there was no surviving. But he remained vigilant. He kept saying, "What's the next test? What's the next procedure? What's the next thing we can do?" And my mother, his second oldest child, she spent all the time in the hospital with him. We took care of him in his final hours. And she finally said to him, you can't survive another procedure. You can't survive more surgeries. We can't do that. And he said something very profound. He said, "But if we don't try, isn't that like suicide?" And I've been mulling that over now for a while. If you don't try to find a way to stay alive, isn't that like suicide? Well, now, why are you staying alive? What purpose do you have? 96 years old, my grandfather made plenty of money, 6 children. I forget how many cousins I have, multitude of grandchildren, and then great grandchildren. What more do you have to accomplish? 96 years old, why do you still need to be here? And you're suffering, you're in pain. Now, I didn't want my grandfather to die, of course, but what reason? What was it? Why did he need to be here still if suffering is all that awaited him? I struggled to understand that until I realized that it's not a dichotomy. There's actually a third option. It's not just suffering for a pleasure reward. The thing that suffering and pleasure have in common is that they are both experienced. They are both of consciousness. So, what is the third option? Is non existence at all. The void. I don't care if you're religious, what you believe about the afterlife, where we came from, creationism. I don't care. None of that's important because the basis is there is non existence and there is existence. Existence comes in consciousness, which causes experiences. And experiences run the gambit from positive to negative, all over the place. But the void is nothing. Where we came from is nothing. Is it better to experience the gambit of suffering and pleasure? Or is it better to experience nothing at all? And my grandfather decided that it was more important that he continued to experience. He didn't want to give up his experience. He didn't want to return to the void. He didn't want to disappear. He decided that was more important. And that's really what it ultimately comes down to. Now, like I said at the beginning, I suffer from depression. Not a happy man. I struggle with finding joy in life. But the alternative to life is non existence. And I side with my grandfather. I would rather exist than not exist. So, why do we suffer? Because it's a part of the human experience. We suffer because that's only half the equation. Life can't always be pleasure, and it mostly won't be. Life is going to be painful, going to be stressful, it's going to be a struggle. But it's better to exist and suffer than to never exist at all.